All right, my fellow hiring managers, a new job application has just come in. Let's see what we have. Word nerd alert. Okay, a longtime gamer, picks up new software quickly, no coding skills, not great. Bachelor of Fine Arts, a game artist then, in creative writing. That sounds marketable. Okay, another degree, awesome. History. I'm just fending off the job offers with a bat here, huh? Any advanced degrees? No? Okay. Hobbies? Hell's bells. Just look at this mess. This is a parent's worst nightmare, isn't it? This is like, honey, the kid is never moving out of the basement. And if you had not guessed by now, this is my skill set. I never imagined that I could not just use my love of storytelling in my job, but actually have it be the main reason I get paid, in real human monies and everything. Mind you, my career path to where I am now was deeply weird and inefficient. I essentially hurled myself off my career's diving board blindfolded. I somehow ended up in the water instead of braining myself on the pool's edge, but I wish that a decade ago, someone had given me the talk I'm about to give you. It would have cut eye holes into that blindfold, and that's the first vital step towards becoming a superhero. The TLDR about me, I've been in the industry since 2006. I've worked on a bunch of games in a bunch of genres, and I've been on both sides of the hiring desk more than a few times. I convinced my current company to create a position for me, and yes, obviously I go by Khan professionally, because if you have that last name, why wouldn't you? Exactly. When I tell someone in the industry what I do, the most common question I'm asked is, ooh, how do you get into narrative design? Which is usually immediately followed by, and what is it did you do exactly? So I'll briefly cover what narrative design is and what it isn't, and which skills you might already have that would help you become one even without any narrative experience. As with all game dev, getting your foot in the door is the hardest part. But if you know how to find relevant jobs at home or abroad, you can stack the deck in your favor to get them, or even convince a studio to create the job you want. So I hope you'll walk a day knowing that you can take the plunge and successfully transition into narrative design from another discipline by making your existing expertise into your unique selling point. And that if you love storytelling, you can get paid to do it. Two quick housekeeping notes before we move on. I talk fast, I cycle through slides quickly, and I don't want you to have to hover with your phone ready to go at all times, so I have marked any vaguely useful reference slides with a camera icon in the top right. These are probably text-heavy slides. I'm likely not going to be reading them all off, so take a pic, read them later, or check them out on GDC Vault after this. And the other thing is I've had atrocious tech issues, so some animations may be a little funky. Please bear with me. So, what is it? It is mysterious and misunderstood. Last year, I met an executive. I said, hi, I'm Khan. I'm the senior narrative designer. And he immediately replied, yeah, that's not a real thing. You're going to have to get used to explaining what it is and being a champion for it in your project as well as a discipline as a whole. Narrative departments tend to be very small, if they exist at all. Big companies might have both writers and narrative designers on staff, but many only hire freelance writers when necessary and otherwise rely on game designers to do their own writing. The main difference between it and writing is this. A game writer's primary responsibility is to promote the story that is told in the scripts they write. Their job is to choose the cleanest, clearest, highest quality words they can assemble and give them to other devs to put them into the game. A narrative designer writes as well, but our primary job is getting the whole game to tell the same story. We help create the story and then coordinate the different disciplines in the project to tell it together. Our most important storytelling tool is not the written word. We use the game's feature set to tell the story. And I do mean all of its features. All of this is gameplay, and it will all tell a story with you or without you. So you better join forces. Ask me sometime about the Hyder Simul animation. It's hilarious. Anyway, the central part of this primary job is preventing the game's story and the player's experience from contradicting each other. You've all seen ludonarrative dissonance in some form. If the game's HUD, if it's the heads-up display, is sci-fi and futuristic, but the story involves dragons and archers, or if the music is super tense and dramatic during dull crafting gameplay, you get the idea. So, cool. Depends on the project, the company, and the seniority of the position. I'm afraid there's no one answer to this. I've done a great many things in a decade of narrative design, from script writing to monetizing live events. I mean, there's a real range here. And we also handle normal game designer work like tracking tasks and communicating and documenting feature designs and using a game editor. But to give you a clearer idea, let's see what kind of skills you already have that would apply. Narrative design is intensely cross-functional, so these are the ones to highlight in your job application. And also, don't freak out, I don't have half the skills I'm about to list, and you don't have to either. Hi, audio people. You have skills that most narrative designers really need and don't acquire until we level up later. And the ability to communicate with an audio designer or a sound engineer in their own jargon helps a lot. You will be able to cut a lot of time off of a recording session. Art, 2D or 3D, meat space, digital, graphic design, fine art, tech art, cinematics, animation. Speaking to artists, again, in their own language means that you can contribute to discussions about visual elements and help create or give feedback on cutscenes. Non-game entertainment too. It's not just acting and directing. Set and costume design and the research that goes into it comes up surprisingly often. And behind the scenes logistics can be pretty similar, from getting something on stage to getting something into a cinematic cutscenes. A lot of it is project management. Coding, oh, I really wish I had actual skills in this field. If you do, you probably know you can write your own ticket, so why not write one that takes you to career in storytelling if you like to do that? QA, a narrative designer needs to be able to spot plot holes, but more importantly, a good QA tester's meticulous, process-oriented thinking will help you keep pipelines and storylines alike straight. Sales and marketing are about selling an idea, and that's what narrative design is too, except the idea is the game's story, and you get to cuss a lot more. Production, goodness gracious. As we advance in our careers, these are the skill sets that go from being nice to haves to being the reason you get hired. Especially as you go up in narrative design, a lot of your work is about coordinating other people. Game designers, you'll have an easier time of it than many, but you will need to perfect your creative writing and technical writing skills. Level designers, same as game design. Your familiarity with editors and scripting and player progression, all very useful, but you'll need to work probably even harder on your technical documentation and creative writing chops. And writers, your writing chops are hopefully fine, but your task is to beef up your design skills, so it's time for a game jam. If I haven't mentioned a skill set you have, you're wondering how it would apply, please do ask me afterwards. So you might be wondering if these skills are enough, or if having no explicitly narrative design experience would prevent you from succeeding. To succeed, prepare. You'll need to learn your stuff beforehand as well as learning on the job. Join the International Game Design Association's special interest groups for game design and game writing. Ask questions. Ask for recommended reading. I have a few recommendations, but this is hardly an all-inclusive list. Look for the intersections of your current discipline with narrative design. In other words, find the people who are the storytellers in your fields, and then look for content made by narrative designers. Figure out how you can tell your stories. Start consuming games critically, looking at what stories they tell and how they tell them. Play games outside your favorite genres, play on mobile as well as PC and console. Take notes, take it seriously. No one will pay you to tell stories in games if you can't explain how games tell stories. Communication and soft skills in general are not optional. Game design and narrative design are both basically 1% having an idea and 90% making people talk to each other. So work at becoming a facilitator if you want to succeed. If you poll your fellow attendees over a drink, you will get plenty of examples and probably rants about major expensive problems caused by a lack of clear and consistent vision. I believe one of the best ways to succeed early on as a narrative designer is to become the designated driver for vision keeping. Not the person who sets the vision, that'd be nice, but but an acknowledged point of contact for the team's questions about the project's direction. Use your position as a newbie to your advantage. Question your teammates about the vision for their features. Use that to create a list of questions for the leads to further clarify what their intent is and identify any misalignment. And then once you know who has the final word on the project's vision and direction, get some time on the calendar and make sure you understand their vision using the questions you prepped. Then use their answers to make reference infographics and put them on the wall. It is weird how much more useful a physical game on the wall is than digital documentation. One thing you see every time you need to go to the bathroom, and one you have to go looking for. So keep these updated. Become the go-to person for questions anyone has. If your new team is unused to including narrative in its workflow, use the first few weeks to start to identify the ways they could use you, including cheap, that's a very important word here, cheap ways to add narrative elements to the studio's games using the existing mechanics and feature set. You might want to use your fellow devs as voice talent, add flavor text using the tutorial system that they already have, put character backgrounds on the game's website, prepare a list of ideas, and refine it regularly. Before, however, you make any suggestions, get time and scope estimates from any other disciplines involved. I have an idea that will only take 3 days from UI to execute, and look at all of these benefits is much more convincing than I have an idea, and I think it would be super cool. The one thing that will most stack the deck for you is a killer narrative design portfolio. Plan to work on it pretty much constantly from now until retirement. I was recently asked to critique someone's portfolio. They'd been hunting for months with no luck. I gave them advice, and I will now give it to you in a more organized format. I got a nice box of chocolates and a bottle of wine from them when they were recently hired at Arcane Studios. So that's the only reason I suppose you should listen to me. Every time you apply to a new role, the portfolio you submit has to be tailored to that application. Most relevant content at the top, fantasy writing at the top for a swords and sorcery RPG, military-themed pieces at the top for an FPS, include only 4 or 5 separate pieces. In fact, create 2 portfolios, a master one with absolutely everything that you're proud of and that is never shown to a hiring manager, and a modular narrative design portfolio you can plug and play. Writing samples alone, no matter how good they are, won't get you hired. And also, I don't care how talented you are, writing is mostly about editing and revising, not talent. Creative writing is about careful choice. Edit first with a machete and then with a scalpel. Any older work you're even considering should be thoroughly revised and cleaned up before you consider including it in your master portfolio. It should contain writing samples that demonstrate your ability to set a scene in a few words, to convey different characters through their spoken dialogue, and examples of game-specific or genre-specific writing. And also include technical writing. Tutorial steps or first-time user experiences are great to see in a portfolio, as are item names and maybe marketing descriptions for those items. The portfolio you send out should, however, prove that you can write well and that you understand game design elements. So mission design and dialogue, or names of achievements and an explanation of why you chose them for that franchise. Highlight any technical abilities you have. If you've made working prototypes or mods or maps, link them early on, and for God's sakes, check that your links work. On Mac or mobile too. Don't ask me to download some sketchy.x file because I am not gonna. A link to a playthrough video on YouTube will do just fine. Highlight any experience you have with the process of getting narrative into games, briefs for outsourced artists, putting contracts out to tender if you're a project manager, creating estimates or roadmaps. Leverage your existing knowledge set. One last note on contents. Narrative design, like game writing, skews slightly more female than most disciplines. If I am the hiring manager, and I see a portfolio full of lazy stereotypes or featuring only male characters so that I can't tell whether you can even write female characters, then, well, Now, on to formatting your portfolio. The TLDR is that navigating it should be a curated, organized experience, even from a recruiter's phone. Prevent a wall of text with a small intro section, even before the table of contents, which spells out which skills each piece illustrates. Use a Mad Libs style if that helps you remember what you want to talk about. The ABC section shows mission dialogue in a blah genre setting where I had N lines per mission to establish X, Y, and Z to an LMNOP audience. By contrast, in the DEF section, you get the idea. This is partly for the optics, so that the first thing that a hiring manager sees isn't this long, ugly table of contents, which will make you go, how much reading do I have to do today? I've got a meeting in an hour. But it's mostly to prove that you can edit yourself and that you can select appropriate content to show off. Don't make me read lots of irrelevant stuff to find out if you can actually write and design for my game's genre. Make it clear as to why you chose each sample. Revise and then edit and then get a second set of eyes on your spelling and grammar. A single typo can send your application right down the pile. If you've let errors get through in your portfolio, which should demonstrate your best work, then I'll assume it shows either a lack of attention to detail or a lack of command of your language or both. As for your CV or resume, there's a lot of good advice out there about polishing it up. So I'll just add that if you want to be a designer, act like it. Use white space deliberately. 1 page, 12-point font, easy to parse. That's it, moving on. So, your portfolio is in progress and you're on the hunt. So you start by going to one of the major industry websites you know of and typing in narrative. Yeah. Full disclosure, this is for the UK only, but still, you're gonna have to cast a really wide net. Use keywords in your searches and you'll assemble a long list of mostly irrelevant jobs and narrow it down from there. Peer really closely at game writer job descriptions in particular. Do they really want just a pure writer, or is there scope to offer further services there? If they mention joining a writing team, they want a writer. Aim for the salary range of a game designer. Non-Americans considering the USA, you'll be offered a lot more, but remember there's a lot of hidden costs. Healthcare can be insanely expensive. Rents in tech hubs are comparable to central London or Paris, and you will need a car. Americans considering working abroad. Their salaries will sound low to you, but remember that you get a lot of hidden benefits paid for by your taxes, and the cost of living tends to be much more predictable in Europe. As for the UK, Yeah, ask me again in April or June. Yes, Christmas. Ask me on Valentine's Day. Look, sell everything you can, store what you can't bear to sell, and don't be scared. I moved to Scotland for a contract job with 2 suitcases, a carry-on, and a backpack. Extra baggage fees, by the way, always cheaper than shipping boxes. Whether at home or abroad, the type of studio you choose will determine what kind of work you do. So, option 1, spoiler alert, for those who enjoy blood, sweat, and tears, there is indie and there is freelance. Your expertise from another discipline might make you a really much more attractive candidate here, as you will need to wear several hats. And a large hat will be branding and marketing, because as the resident language person in a smaller studio, you will be writing a lot of ad copy. You'll also have to deal with clients without any protective layers of bureaucracy that larger companies might have, which can be a serious threat to mental health. Option 2 is, of course, AAA. If you don't have any narrative experience yet, being hired by a AAA studio as a narrative designer is fairly unlikely unless all the stars are aligned and your portfolio is face-meltingly awesome. So option 3 might be more applicable, and these are the sort of corporate game mills. I don't really know what the term for them is. It's more casual, more casual free-to-play games, mobile, browser, small games. They can make amazing contributions to your CV and portfolio. They can really buff it up. High churn, multiple projects, that means you can pinch hit and learn new skills on the job. Caveats, they do tend to approach games as a business, and depending on the country can have quite corporate attitudes and company cultures. They can be less familiar with hiring from overseas, so you might need to help their HR department out a little more than you would normally with things like visa processes. And you may need to be even more of an advocate for narrative design than normal, because they will likely use dev pipelines in which they're not used to including narrative. Option 4, sorry, hold on. Option 4, outsourcing studios, especially in Asia, who do work for hire. The caveats are about the same as they are for game mills, but I have an ex-colleague who jumped a huge number of levels all at once by virtue of being an English-speaking extrovert who understood Western game design practices. In exchange for working in an obscure studio in a less desirable city, he was immediately given a team of designers to train in those practices so that they could use them to make mobile games for other people. Option 5 is to grind for XP. If you've been applying around and you're not getting any responses because of lack of experience, you might want to consider doing a narrative adjacent gig for a year or so. Adding even slightly relevant experience to your CV could tip the balance. I taught high school English in Pakistan for a year, with no training, by the way, but it put some really marketable skills on my resume. Speaking to a bored audience was one, actually. Consider companies that provide outsourced translation or advertising or art or voiceover animation. They often need liaisons to help interpret the briefs and feedback they receive from their clients and communicate back. So, whether you are job searching at home or abroad, there is one more important tool in your toolbox, which is convincing a studio to create a job for you. A speculative application is you arguing for a studio's creation of a new narrative design position. It's how I got my job at Splash Damage, actually. These work when you can identify a need that a studio has for narrative support before or soon after they realize they have that need. So, find an appropriate team lead on LinkedIn, ask for an informational interview. Okay, informational interview is the important word there. See if you can get 20 minutes of their time on the phone in person for their take on whether their studio could use narrative. Ask if the studio is organized by project or if there's central support departments like QA or narrative design, so that you would know what to suggest in your pain letter. That is something that says, hey, here is why you need story and it's causing you trouble, and here is how I can provide it. To find the studio, scour industry news. You're looking for any hints of narrative projects coming up, any reviews of games that call out bad storytelling, bad voiceover, bad translation. You can offer to help them with that problem. Look for ambitious studios who are trying to grow beyond perhaps more humble roots, or see if the studio has any writers already on staff. Look them up on LinkedIn to see if their game designers seem to be more systems focused than content focused. And try not to make assumptions based on the studio's preferred or historical genres of game. My partner's current mobile game addiction is a deck building RPG with a surprising number of unique voiceover lines for a free-to-play game. It's too bad that their translation's not actually very good. It's very successful back home, but it would be nice if they had somebody to check their translations. When you're writing this pain letter, to paraphrase Start With Why by Simon Sinek, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech was I have a dream, not I have a plan. So your first sentence needs to elicit emotion, be an evocative and passionate statement about the importance of narrative in their games, or how important it could be. And then you drop some facts, which, I'm not going to do your research for you, but they mostly should be based around the fact that good narrative sells more units. There is data out there. And then you say, I have a plan, to reassure them that they won't have to do a lot of thinking to be able to say yes to you. If they support multiple live projects, offer yourself as a central resource. But if they focus on one or two big ones at a time, state how you would add value to those specifically. Offer them a probation period. If it doesn't work out within a year, you'll exit gracefully, but then you'll have experience. the list of what they would need to do and what you'd need to do is really should be ready for the second email, not necessarily in the first letter. As with any job search, networking is not optional. Look for relevant networking events online and in MeetSpace with any narrative or writing focused groups that you should join. There's a lot of resources on networking out there. So I'll just say that. One, if you are job searching and you are not trying to attend at least 2 networking events per month, you are not taking it very seriously. And 2, the best piece of advice I ever got on how to introduce yourself at any networking event. Hi, I'm Khan. I heard you might be making game XYZ next year. Sounds challenging. I'd love to chat with you about it if you have 5 minutes. If not now, maybe this week? Done. Sorted. Okay, let's pretend a training montage now happens in the horrible expanse of time that stretches between applying to jobs and getting selected for an interview, and move right on to interview prep. You may get a design test, You may get a design test before you qualify for an interview, or you may only get one after a successful first interview. But narrative-specific prep advice, again, there's other more general advice out there. Narrative-specific advice for both is the same. Number 1, have a very firm grasp of what text goes into a game. Think about how you would change each one to match a specific setting and what errors you might run into. Number 2, play that company's games and prepare opinions on what you would do differently and what you liked and didn't and why, all within the context, again, of narrative, character development, and story. Think about and be prepared to answer or complete common design test questions or tasks. This is a big one, so hold on for a second. The biggest reason to prep for these, instead of trying to answer them on the fly, is to figure out the intent behind the question. If they're asking where you would start in creating a new region or a quest line for your favorite game, what they want to know is where you instinctively look for inspiration. They want to peek into your head and understand your process. Do you document first or afterwards? Do you think out loud or on paper? Do you prefer to brainstorm with people or solo? These are cultural fit questions as well as technical ability questions. I'm happy to talk further about interview prep after this talk. We will be in Overlook 3022, which is just across, so come find me if we run out of time for questions. So, after listening to me ramble at top speed for a while, I hope that you have learned a few things. Narrative design is a misunderstood discipline, but the nice thing about that is that you can define what kind of narrative designer you want to be for yourself. You can find the studio that fits you. You can define what narrative design means to you. Hello? Because it's a young discipline, because it's, it's still kind of a little Wild West out there. When I started out, there was no such thing as narrative design. It's different from game writing and from game design, and you shouldn't apply to narrative jobs the same way you would to those. You can not only apply your current skill set to succeed, but that skill set is in fact the unique selling point that will set you apart from your competition. If you can explain how it will add value to their projects. You will succeed if you love language, if you come prepared, if you're willing to learn on the job as well as on your own, and if you ask good questions. You will succeed harder if you actively use and improve your diplomacy and communication skills to support the team through vision keeping and adding narrative elements to the project that use the existing feature set. Creating an appropriate portfolio is going to make the difference between your getting hired or not. You can find or make a role for yourself, and you should prepare for interviews and design tests in about the same way. The point is, if you love storytelling, and if you keep the above in mind, you can get paid for it, and that's actually pretty cool. So, thank you. Any questions? Please go ahead and come on up to the mic if you have any questions. Oh, and we have no time for questions at all, so I will see you across the hall in Overlook. Thank you very much.